This is Start, Launch, Grow, brought to you by Million Labs.
Here's what we cover in today's episode. In our catch-up section, we talk about the biggest pitfalls of building an app. Then I will sit down with Ken Crowell, Managing Partner at Employtest, to discuss his Start, Launch, Grow journey. And finally, we wrap up with one clear takeaway. Let's get started. Hi, Simon. Welcome back. How was your training last week?
I survived my training. It was cold and it was wet. I was up on the hills doing some navigation training. Yeah, not the day job, but it was just cold and wet.
So one thing people should know about you is that you love driving. So a typical vacation for Simon is actually to drive 1 week to Egypt, to then drive another week there, right, to some challenges, and then drive 1 week back. So I've never met someone with that passion. You picked the wrong job.
Yeah, it's always sat down though, isn't it? It's not good for you. But anyway, there you go.
Well, yeah. So what we want to do today is We want to discuss the biggest challenges of building an app, and obviously always combine it with some learnings and useful tips for you guys of how you can apply that to your next project. And I think before we dive into the challenges, we wanted just to give you a bit of a background of how building an app looked like before the rise of vibe coding and no code, and how it looks like today to get a better understanding of where we are in the industry.
Prior to the no code and vibing, your typical project was 100K and 12 to 18 months worth of work. And then I guess Vibe no code came along and 10x'd that and reduced it by 10x. So, the average project for us now is kind of the 10K mark, something like that, and is kind of 6 to 8 weeks. So, it's considerably faster. And as a result of that, you have to rethink about the way you do things. So if you've never built a product before or an app or anything like that, then the obvious things that you have to do first is scope it or create a specification. You then have to do the design piece. So like, what is it going to look like? Then the build, and then the testing, QA and testing, quality assurance and testing, and obviously then the handover. And around that, you typically have a project management effort to make sure that it all goes on time, all goes on budget. And if we just do a comparison, scoping in our world is probably about 2 days work, maybe even less now, which is about 5% of the project time. In the kind of old days, that would have been 4 weeks. If it's a multi-billion-pound project, it might have been 4 years of scoping. So it was really a big piece in there. And, the major challenge in there was people were writing scopes that were taking so long, so many words in the document that, almost by the time you got to the build phase, everything you wrote in the scope's already out of date, like things have moved on. And that's really particularly the case today. If you were building a scope and you spent weeks or months on a scope, and say, we're going to use this AI model and we're going to do this and that, by the time it came to build, that AI model's like gone 3 times over. It's just, it's not worth it. So you kind of need to get the scope the right size for the project. And we reckon, 5% of the project is about right. Design, again, probably a week's worth of work. In the new world, it would have been months, 2-3 months in the old world.
And that also includes feedback iterations, right?
For both of this, yeah. So that's, scoping's 2 days, but that's actually creating the scope and then getting the customer to feedback and so forth. Same with the design, it's 1 week, but that also includes the feedback loops in that. And you could argue even design might shrink again because we've got the ability for AI to do some of the designs for us now. So we don't always need a full-on design suite to be able to get an MVP out, for example. Then development is kind of like 60 to 70% of the work. That would probably be still the same in a real project. It's probably about the same, but the difference is like this is 4 weeks. And in the real world, it would have been, or in the old world, it would have been 10 months plus a year, something in that range. And then we've got QA testing. So this kind of testing to make sure that what you've built is what was required of the scope and actually works. And so we've got that at about 5%. If we look at our average projects, 5% of the time versus probably months, 2-3 months of testing in the old world. And then wrapping around that is kind of probably 3% of project management. So it's just somebody to be able to make sure it stays on time, etc. The longer the project, the more project management you need, because you need to keep everything in line and everything's, more people involved. Obviously, the bigger the project, more project management. So in keeping these projects short and sharp, you're actually reducing that project management requirement. More likely it's going to be on time, more likely it's going to be on budget.
It's also a completely different type of project management. I think that was one of the most interesting findings we had over time, is that the definition of a project manager just has changed. When I think of a project manager, I think of someone sitting in the calls and, writing the summaries and, all of that good things. But actually, when your overall budget is like 10K and, like you want to ship within 8 weeks, you just don't have the time for that. And it oftentimes just doesn't make sense. So instead, I think what increases in value is like also having a developer that's a product thinker, right? And works closely with the customer, and the management becomes like just overseeing what the others are doing and trying to automate also a bunch of things.
Yeah. And I think on the development side, the interesting thing is in the old world, you'd have had multiple developers involved. So you'd have had a back-end developer, a front-end developer, maybe some kind of DevOps type thing. So you'd have had multiple people involved. Whereas now our no-code and vibe coders, they're full stack. So they do everything. So you don't need to have stand-ups and sprint meetings and all these things anymore, because it's a single developer doing it. They can talk directly with the customer, and actually you've got that really quick feedback loop in the development cycle as well. So I think that's been a major change as well, that just speeds things up. Less interpretation issues, like the lead dev goes and sits in on the customer meeting and then tries to create that into sprint tickets and blah, blah, blah. And by the time it gets to the actual product, it looks completely different to what the customer thought it was. So all of that has gone away.
One of the biggest takeaways is really that tech alone is not enough. So if you are thinking about building a product, you also need to keep in mind that your processes, your whole operating model needs to go hand in hand with the tech, because you can have the best tech, you can have Vibe. But if you are still operating the traditional way, if you're still coming to us with a 200 pages document to scope out the project, you don't make use of the speed and you still move slowly. And I think that's the biggest mistake we see with companies, especially larger companies, that struggle to keep up with that pace and actually integrate, the tools within their existing operations. And something we always teach, right? It's like, it's not only the tech. The tech is just one bit. It's also the operations behind that Simon outlined.
And a poor specification can be a 200-page document. That's a poor specification when you're going into Vibe or no code. It might be a great specification if you're going to spend 12 months, 18 months building it. It's a waste of time going into Vibe. As you said, it's too much time. 1 or 2 days of specification is more than enough. And it's about getting the right things into the specification. So who are the personas that are going to be using this app? It's an admin, it's a seller and a buyer. Those are the personas. What does the data architecture look like? What are the key features in here? Maybe some high-level wireframes of what each screen's going to look like through the app. What's the monetization strategy for it? And probably the test cases as well, because if you can do those up front, that's really going to help when you get to the QA phase. So if you can define all that up front, and that is literally a 1 or 2 day activity, then you've got enough to be getting started. So getting a good specification will get you a much better product out. If you don't do specification, you just jump straight into build, you will have a mishmash of stuff.
Even if it's vibe coding, it still costs you quite a lot because you have to rework things, and especially the database architecture, right? I mean, ultimately, this is, the UI you can change quicker, but you can't change the backend so easily. The second big pitfall is around testing. What we see is that people either don't see the value of paying for testing, or they underestimate the amount it takes if they do it themselves. And no matter whether it's now no code Vibe, this piece is still super critical and still needed. What we always try to do is we try to add an external person going through an app. So we found that on average, like if someone looks at the app for the first time with fresh eyes, they found an average around 30% more issues. And that's what you want, right? You want someone breaking your app, right? And giving you also some feedback in terms of, is it intuitive? Is it not intuitive, etc. And sometimes a non-technical person can be also a good fit for that job. That's an interesting learning we made along the way. Yes, you want a technical QA developer for, discussing or judging the backend and all that kind of thing. but you often also want a non-technical person to go through the user journey and put himself or herself in the front of in the shoes of the customers. So that piece is definitely still valuable, and we recommend you that you either take enough time to do it and add maybe one or two other people to help you out with that, or to really make that part of the budget when building an application.
Lots of people underestimate how much effort is required to do that. Founders assume, well, you'll have done all the testing. And of course we do testing and QA, etc. But actually the only person that really knows what it was going to look like and was they were expecting is the person that, outsourced the work, the founder effectively. And so they need to spend the time going through every screen, doing every persona journey. And that just takes time. But that's the only way they're going to know if their own app works, is to check that themselves and be happy that it does. So yeah, it just takes more time. So I think the pitfall 3 that we come across is kind of the hidden costs piece. So there are always these hidden costs when you're building an app, whether that be third-party APIs that you didn't consider. You just assumed that maybe the data would magically appear in the app, and so or the AI tools or whatever it was that would just be free, and they're not, and you're having to pay for an API connection and some of that data access, etc. So those tend to be hidden costs. Obviously, we try to identify those to a customer. But if you're building this yourself, is just don't forget that, you might want to charge $5 a month for your service, but it turns out that AI and this API and that API are going to cost you $12 a month, per customer. So you've got to factor those into your overall commercial model. And I think if you're vibe coding these days, what lots of people underestimate is the AI costs of doing that. Now, yes, it might cost you a couple of cents to write a feature, but when you add that up and you're spending weeks and weeks actually creating stuff with the AI coding tools, you suddenly can end up with thousands of dollars worth of AI costs. Now that's starting to reduce, but it's still a thing. So it's not free to develop a Vibe app. You can have lots of costs from Claude or ChatGPT or wherever.
Yeah, 100%. If you want a deep dive of any of the challenges, just let us know, and we can also have a separate episode just focusing on that. I think for today, what we've learned is having some data points of what it looked like in the old days. How does building an app look like back then? How does it look like today? And then we identified 3 key challenges, which are number 1, a poor specification, number 2, QA being completely underestimated, and number 3, the hidden costs, especially in the area of vibe coding. Now let's look at how Ken solved these challenges when we built his app, which is quite some time now. It's like 20 years or something, right? So it's a long time. So he started the old way for sure. Today I'm speaking with Ken, Managing Director at Employtest. He's based in the US and is in the HR industry since over 20 years. Ken is helping organizations make faster and better hiring decisions. Welcome to the Start, Launch, Grow podcast, Ken. It's awesome to have you here.
Thanks, Verena. Good to be here with you.
Ken, you are probably solving one of the biggest challenges of the time, which is finding the right talents. Can you walk us a little bit through how you help companies in the process of finding the right talent?
Yeah, every job applicant looks great on paper. You're looking at their resume, you're looking at it in the tracking system across their resumes, across their job interviews, and everybody is a superstar until you hire them and get them into your offices and they start doing the actual work. So the problem is resumes and job interviews don't tell the full story of what each applicant can do. So we sell pre-employment tests that helps hiring managers, business owners, HR teams make smarter hiring decisions by using the test to figure out what they actually know before you hire them.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see that you guys are now on the market since 20 years. So it's a long time ago. So when we look at the start piece of our framework, let's go back in the days, like when you started the company, how did you validate the market and find out the niche or the solution you have in mind is actually what your customers need?
Pre-employment testing has been around for a long time, and companies like staffing companies, a lot of your listeners may be familiar with how they used pre-hire tests back in the day. So if you've ever gone to a job at a staffing or recruitment firm, then it's likely you've taken one of these types of tests. So what we did is we started offering these tests much more to a corporate market and less so about to the staffing and recruitment area. really specializing in small to medium-sized organizations. So, attorney's office with 10 attorneys, your local city or county government, just any company with perhaps less than 250 employees. That's our area. And the place we really focus on is skills tests. So, what can a person actually do? Now, educational degrees and work experience doesn't mean somebody can actually do the job. So the skills tests verify what their actual skills are. So common tests, things like attention to detail, cognitive skills, computer skills, those are some of the ones that are really resonate with the client base.
What were maybe also some of the concerns or challenges you faced, especially at the beginning?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really pre-employment testing, something that's used a lot with big companies. So your worldwide companies, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, those are a couple based here in Atlanta. All of those large companies are using pre-employment testing, but we bringing it to the smaller companies, especially a small company with 5 employees, 10 employees, they don't really know that these types of hiring tools exist. So it's the challenge is really just getting the word out to those people that, hey, you need to be using something like this to compete with the big guys, because it's all a competition for talent. We're all competing for the best people out there.
Yeah, especially, like in the whole remote world, right? It's like so
Yes.
difficult now. Companies are competing internationally, and I think this is an additional challenge.
Even remote work, that they're not sitting, the new employee is not sitting there in the office and can't just pop over to the next office to ask a question. You need people to be independent. You need to be able to think on their own and problem solving. So those are the types of problems that Employtest is helping them. Does your job applicant have those sort of basic problem solving skills? Because if they're remote working, then they won't have the connections in the office to kind of lean on other people to get the job done.
You validated the market, you found your niche, you came up with a solution, and now we are entering the launch phase of our framework. Can you walk us a little bit through how your first version looked like and at what stage you at a tech solution that we built together?
We were working with several test publishing companies and reselling their products, but the problem existed was that they were all operating on just different platforms, and it was creating confusion with our customers. It was creating maybe a little bit of frustration on their side, certainly frustration internally as we try to pick the right platform for the right customers. So we said, okay, we need a way to bring this all together into one platform that's really easy to use for the customers. So we started working on and looking at a couple of options. We could have built it ourselves. We could go with some sort of no-code, low-code platform. And after looking at those and looking at the resources that our company had, we opted to go for the low-code, no-code solution in building the front-end dashboard that would bring all of the tests, and there are hundreds of tests, into one easy place for our customers to use.
So we built the platform using bubble.io. Can you walk us a little bit through why you actually decided using low code versus any traditional development method? And maybe also some of the initial concerns you had when using it and how this has been addressed.
Yeah, I mean, a big concern of it is going to be cost. If we were developing it directly from scratch, I'm a non-tech founder, so that means that I need to go out and find someone with a lot more tech chops to help manage this project, and those are expensive people to find. I didn't really think it was needed when I was looking across the landscape of options, that we didn't really need our own platform if we were just bolting on a user interface and via API to a testing publisher or other test companies. So I didn't really think it was necessary to build something completely from scratch, and a low code option like Bubble through you guys was something that made a lot of sense to us, just from a resources, a hosting, a headache. As a smaller company, we don't have the deep pockets to build something like that from scratch.
How has the platform evolved over time? Like when you look at version 1 to what it is right now?
Well, I mean, we've added, of course, like with any app, a lot of new features. We've added features that customers use, and we've added a lot of features that customers don't use. So it's one of the mistakes that we made, ironically, is probably giving too much weight to uh, customers' input when maybe their use case was the only one that really needed that. So there were a few different areas we built out in the dashboard app that in hindsight, nobody's really using. And maybe even, in fact, that customer that requested it is not even using. So we really have tried to now, over the past 18 months, 2 years, really trying to stay in the middle lanes and really add functionality that is going to appeal to the masses and not so much the edge cases.
So how do you now approach that? How do you now test whether a new feature really makes sense for you?
Well, the sales reps are always looking to make, of course, sales and provide great customer service to our great clients. And they're always, hey, why can't we do this? Or have we thought about doing this? And I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. Let's see how many people ask for it. Let's include this in emails or on-screen suggestions to say, does this sound like a good new feature to you? And just see who raises their hand. A lot of people to raise their hand. And by lot, I mean really 5 to 10 customers. If we're not seeing some sort of just basic groundswell of people requesting something or at least saying this would be great, then we just kind of wait. We put it on pause and wait 6 months to see what else is going to bubble up for it. But the salespeople, the customer service people don't always like that answer. But I mean, it's real. We can't build everything out that everybody requests.
You also can't please everyone, right? So that's a
for real.
tough challenge that you have to learn. And there will be people complaining sometimes about stuff, etc. If they really like a product and are using it, they are also fine to, like wait or show a bit more acceptance than what most people think. So
Right.
this is what we are seeing. Now that you have launched the platform, Ken, when you look at the growth phase, what does success look like for you in terms of scaling the application?
It's obviously driven by sales and marketing numbers. The environment in which we are in is the larger economic environment is a little bit volatile right now. So it's difficult to know exactly what the future numbers will be. Is that 10% more? Is it 30% more? There's just an incredible amount of market space out there for a company like Employtest in terms of bringing these tests to small and medium-sized businesses. And this is something that virtually every company that's hiring can use. So it's really just a matter of how well can we get the word out to these hiring managers and HR teams at small to medium-sized organizations. That's the challenge.
How has the number of users evolved over time, and how frequently is the application used today?
Generally, we administer 75,000 tests a year, something like that, with the majority of those coming through our dashboard. That the Million Labs team has built. We try to keep the actual process of administering tests very simple, because our customers may not use testing every month. They may not use it but once a quarter. So we want to make it very intuitive that when they get in, after not being in there for 6 months, they can jump in, spend a minimal amount of time on the dashboard and get what they need accomplished.
And obviously you are quite a unique case in the sense that, we work with you since several years. So when you look back the last 20 years, how has your role as a founder also evolved over time?
Yeah, it's evolved. It ebbs and flows. From the early days, as we're talking with every customer, those are great times and enjoy it. And even customers that we miss talking to, get to know them and their families. And this is a B2B environment, so it is a little bit more unusual. But if you talk to people every month, then those relationships start to build. Of course, we can't do that now. We have the sales team that provides that one-on-one contact. But occasionally, we'll see favorite customers calling in or emailing. I like to jump on the phone or jump in and just say a quick hello to them. We love talking to them, and I mean, our product really makes a difference in giving them some more certainty in their hiring. So they're really thankful, and we appreciate them.
How big is the team right now?
We have about 10 people on our team, from sales and marketing to technical side and development. It's a small, nimble team. Yeah, we're real people. And some of the customers get to know, of course, our sales team and share interests with those guys as well. So it's, it's even though it's more digital, there's still a lot of human touch in what we do.
Which, to be honest, I think in the area of AI, is even more important. Personally, I think like people, yes, on the one hand, obviously, it makes sense and everyone wants to incorporate AI, and I think they should. But if you can balance it and work out where are the parts where still the human element is needed, I think that's a big competitive edge. And people still want to talk to other people.
Yeah, I think so. And we built into our customer service chat. I mean, 90% of the questions are the same questions and they're easily answered by automation. But that 10% is really frustrating for customers. And they like the human touch of, hey, this situation is happening. How do I interpret these school reports? And that's where the team jumps in and really helps out.
When you look back, what would you say are the key lessons learned for you and some advice that you can give for other founders out there?
We have a tremendous, and this is general advice, less specific to our application. We have a tremendous longevity with our employees. Our employees, number one asset. We treat them very well and they stay for years and years and years. And we try to be human in our approach to people management and talent management and being really flexible with their lives, because all of us go through challenges in our lives and we want to just keep the great people who have the knowledge base that they have. And number two is, keep striving, validate your market.
What does validation look like? Like, what did it look like for you? Like, what is a concrete step that they could implement?
Concrete step, I mean, we're always testing just in terms of marketing and validation we have the option to create a lot of different tests. So very specific to different use cases and job titles. And some of them that we want to create, we soon realize that there's not much of a market for. But the validation in terms of engaging with customers, engaging with surveys, and asking them what type of positions they're hiring for and how we can come back and develop tests for those areas. What's missing, because some of the tests that we have are not going to cover every specific need that they have. So really probing our customer base to better understand what they need and then turning around and delivering that. That's the best way to validate before we go down a long path of creating any sort of tool that's not really needed.
Is there something that you would do differently when you look back?
I mean, we, in terms of making our own creating our own dashboard and using the Bubble app and your team, we would have done this a lot sooner. I think we did this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but we should have done it 7, 8 years ago, pre-COVID, and made our lives a lot easier, and we would have grown a lot more quickly had we taken those steps years before. So that's something we wish we had taken more action. I wish I would have taken more action, probably 36 months before we actually did. I think we would have been better served post-COVID had we done that pre-COVID.
Last question from my side, Ken. What is next for Employtest?
We really want to build out job tests for virtually every job title that, maybe the top 1,000 job titles that are on the market. A lot of times we're focusing on the very core center, the top 20 jobs, but we want to build out a suite of tests for the top 1,000 jobs that are on the market. So we can really make more customer specific, more job specific tests, because if we do that, our customers will get some more value out of it. So that's part of the next step.
That sounds exciting. Thank you for taking your time today and walking us through your challenges. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Verena. Good chatting with you.
Good interview with Ken, Verena. What did we learn?
So I think one of the biggest takeaways it's really easy to spend a significant amount of time and money into new features of your application and to find out that no one actually needs them and no one is using them. I think this comes back to our natural tendency of pleasing everyone. I don't even mean like new features you come up with. I think we learned by now that your biggest or your best customer loop is coming from customers, but also your customers can sometimes come up with a lot of nice to haves, right? And you as a business owner, you really need to make the decision, when is it an edge case and when is it really something that applies to the majority users of my application? When does it make financially sense to me? And it sounds easy, but we see it all the time. And the big takeaway is here not to make everyone happy, but to always stick to your processes of when to make the next investment for any features of your application.
So if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more conversations like this, make sure you subscribe to our podcast at all the major podcast providers. Our goal is to encourage more people to take action and turn their ideas into execution, into a startup, into a project. We also run our Start, Launch, Grow newsletter, where we share practical advice for every stage of your journey. Just visit millionlabs.co.uk to learn more. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next episode.